Although I conducted discussion groups, meditations, and occasionally frequented Muriel's group in Springvale, I could tell no one about my personal problems. However, I maintained the positive notion that one day everything would be fine again. Remember, the other group was not paying me anything substantial, for it was only a voluntary service, and in Springvale I was just a visitor. While frequenting Muriel's group, several people showed great interest in getting to know me better. Wendy Joy Clark, who Muriel's husband, Archie, adored, asking me to show her a few simple steps in drawing the human figure and portraits, for she was preparing to make some money at a mind, body, and spirit festival being held annually at the exhibition centre in Melbourne. Interestingly, she was desirous to share the experience with me, and I took that as an opportunity to earn some money for my immediate needs. I was going to talk to people, probably engage in some cold reading, while psychoanalyzing them, and also draw the images of their possible spirit guides or deceased relatives. Naturally, they expected all that activity being due to their belief in spirit communication. However, personally, I was unconvinced about the validity of this exercise, yet what I was able to tell those people has seemingly helped them, which they either then or later confirmed. Being able to stay in a hotel room for a couple of nights meant a great deal to me. I was once asked to assist some people in raising much-needed finances for a spiritually important work by voluntarily helping them by drawing spirit guides, but the whole exercise was once again going to be a case of cold reading, and I thought that anybody could do it. However, if I could help people overcome their troubles in a small way, I would feel fulfilled. I conducted this program together with other volunteers, and the much-needed funds were raised. I regarded it as a charitable occasion, during which I met a number of new friends, but I did not generate any income for my needs. By this time I had already been on the streets for more than 3 weeks, and was afraid of my health deteriorating further, apart from suffering from hernias, which were not yet advanced to a dangerous level, but would soon have to do something about them. I was forced to endure the ordeal until at least I was housed. My storage expenses were also increasing on a weekly basis, but I needed to save money from whatever income I could generate, no matter how small, in order to pay the required deposit and a month's rent in advance when accommodation became available. Wendy became very friendly and often invited me to her home. She had been married for 18 years, but preferred to secretly live a life which was extraordinarily free. Something else I discovered at her place was quite a shock and surprise for me, and I will tell you more about it soon. She wanted to be intimately loved, and her young daughter was not against it. Personally, I was not interested in such a relationship, especially when needing to recover from my own traumas. She even wanted to get a better car, hoping that I would become a permanent friend and lover. She believed that in a different incarnation we were lovers, and told me she had finer hands during that time of our history, but her hands were a little rougher today. Her backyard was like a mini zoo, where she had ducks and rabbits, and one of her rabbits was eager to urinate on her guests' legs and shoes, while one of her cats needed to have a leg amputated after a car accident. Her daughter called it a tripod, It was during the early part of 1995, while having a cup of coffee at Meyer Melbourne Store's coffee lounge, when I had finally been housed, after much suffering on the streets, and some money became available, that I was surprised by my daughter Birgit. In truth, I was now storing myself and my belongings in a very small attachment at the rear of a house in Springvale. I was tired, putting up with a double hernia, which needed to be operated on urgently, and was still wearing a corset to keep the bulging parts of my anatomy in place. The last few years of my unfortunate state almost crippled me in every way, yet I tried not to display my misery to the world. In reality, my life had become drudgery for a very long time. Later, I was befriended with the Connor family, after my help in regard to a psychological issue. I met them at Muriel's, and will be telling you more about these lovely people in a little while. But let me go back to the moment of my drinking a cup of coffee in Meyer Store's coffee lounge. My daughter, after all those years of living with her mother and the Jehovah's Witnesses, approached me from behind, giving me a shock, probably expecting that I would not recognize her, for she had grown into a beautiful young lady. I have already made brief mention of this earlier. She asked me if I recognized, let alone remembered her. I was astounded, and indeed worried, for my memory of Birgit adding rat pellets in my coffee and saturating my belongings with petrol shortly before leaving painted an image I had to flee from immediately. I wondered if she was here to create a scene to hurt me further. As you will understand, I had good reason to believe that she might be there for that purpose. Her other friend approached us from the left, saying, "How can he not remember you, Birgit? He is your father." I responded with, "Do I need to remember you? Was it not you saturating my belongings with petrol? Was it not you having written on a piece of newspaper the words, 'I also decided to go, and since you have many of our memories, many photos and recordings, you can live with those memories, Dad'?" I deliberately said this to remind her that my memories were indeed intact. She stood there saying nothing for a while, and then exclaimed, "I thought you might get hurt if I burnt everything, and so to keep you calm, I wrote those words." While sitting there together with her friend, who I thought was also a Jehovah's Witness, she further explained that sadly none of the matches would light, and she could not burn my things. I remember her telling me that she was very anxious to get away quickly in case I came home. I asked why she chose to do something like that, and she answered me with a question. You know why, don't you?" I still have no answer even today, but one can guess. I remembered how her mother had been burning my books, believing that they were charmed, with the aim of breaking our family apart, and that the devil was very strong. I always considered, as I still do, that she was most certainly advised to do exactly that by their ministers and elders, if not by Ruth and Siegfried Strobach, who were extremely superstitious and very devout witnesses. Obviously, they could not see how similar those human trends were to pagan worship, black magic, and superstition they preached against. A long time ago, and in my early days in Germany, as mentioned, they were burning the valuable gifts my mother sent me. That obviously became the traditional pattern of life of some Jehovah's Witnesses, and after my disfellowshipment by their judicial committee, due to me questioning the spirit and rebellion against their God, I was expected to possess charmed items which would apparently keep me away from the truth and harm them spiritually. Birgit was convinced that by doing what she had been advised to do, she was allegedly helping me to become whole again. I was stunned and saddened about this Jehovah's Witness belief. "Although you are not in the truth," she said, "these days things have changed, you know. You could come to the St. Kilda congregation one Sunday morning, and you will notice the change. They will all be so friendly with you, everyone talking to you. There is only one truth, Dad." I was speechless and indeed shocked at seeing my daughter after all those years, and her advice to me, more or less demanding that I should go with her to the Kingdom Hall, and everything would be just fine. She insisted that her mother would certainly consider getting together again with me once she knew I accepted the only truth. I could not explain where I was coming from and why I was disfellowshipped. She was adamant that somebody was telling lies, and it could never be her mother, for as a witness she could only speak the truth. In other words, my supposedly truthful daughter, Birgit, was accusing me of telling lies. However, I decided to put it all aside and kept psychoanalyzing her for the challenge without telling her anything. I knew that all my academic achievements were ignored by a number of witnesses, including her faithful and allegedly extremely truthful mother. She thought she could help me to see the truth, while still thinking that I was, as always, on the wrong side. She never showed any interest in my knowledge, interests, and skills, treating me as if I was her equal, just the same as her mother, who had a derogatory attitude towards me, never respecting but demanding respect, never accepting but demanding to be accepted, with all her Bible-based knowledge apparently being of the highest order. When I made a brief mention of my homelessness, she did not take any note of it, probably believing that her father could only tell lies, just like her mother had taught her. She did not know anything better other than accuse her father with all kinds of abnormal activity and only telling lies. It was so obvious that it was the indoctrination she had been subjected to under the influence of extremely judgmental people, believing their twisted knowledge being the only truth. Together with her sister, and through religious pressure, they decided to hurt me more, for in their small minds, influenced by their school friends and mother's allegedly Bible-based demands, they could not see the real me. On one side, their mother, in her extremely naive nature, was advising them that people who were disfellowshipped due to rebellion against their God could be expected to commit all kinds of evil. And, on the other, some of their school friends from broken families advising them about men in general being untrustworthy had shaped their twisted minds even further. Their smiles and words like, "I love you, Dad," were remarkably false and obvious, yet I endeavored to make sure that they did not notice being noticed all those years ago. Once again Birgit spoke to me about the skulls she had seen above my shoulders, but I knew with absolute certainty that her sister Annette had such dreams, which she interpreted as skulls with lots of blood spilt on top of them, and coming out of the eye sockets. She even tried to convince Birgit that their father was a magician, and doing evil things like casting spells, and conjuring up evil spirits, just like their beloved mother encouraged them to believe. Maybe it was also because of me taking my supposed daughters into the city to visit some friends at the Victorian Spiritualist Union, which was considered as wicked by those allegedly righteous witnesses. But the spiritualists whom the witnesses considered evil never did anything evil, only practicing what they believed in. They did not cast evil spells, but believed in the afterlife and followed the teachings of Jesus. They believed in spirit communication and conducted healing sessions. My involvement with them was purely curiosity at first, but I became friends with a number of good people there. Unfortunately, Annette's once-upon-a-time abductors, who eventually took her to Magda, used to go to VSU on occasion. However, during the last year of their high school, Annette and her friends were engaged in using Ouija boards, supposedly to communicate with spirits about their future boyfriends, with frightening consequences, although I had studiously warned her against it because of what I had previously been told by other practitioners, but I was not sure if Birgit was also involved in something like that. Birgit was easily led into believing anything and everything said by any of her friends, remaining mentally extremely young for a long while in every aspect of her development. I was wrong in believing she really cared for me in the past, when she was very young, and in her teens she never wanted to believe anything I tried to teach her. For some reason, she considered her mother as being capable of only telling the truth, for she was a dedicated Jehovah's Witness. It was so clear that her mind still remained very young after all those years. That incident of skulls became her most favorite memory, without it being real. Now she was convinced that she too had seen those skulls around me, and according to their mother's teachings, such things were evil. The truth is that I had a complete human skeleton I once had to purchase for my studies in the field of medicine and anatomy. Although I changed my branch of study due to unforeseen circumstances, I still kept that skeleton in its black box, storing it like that, and it had nothing to do with black art, which they were accusing me of. Besides, I did not believe in the benefit of such an art related to devil worship, and was never superstitious. What they thought of seeing as some form of vision was in reality what they might have noticed when I was looking at actual bones. I have never displayed them openly, for I did not wish my children to feel uncomfortable or scared due to the influence of Jehovah's Witness teachings. And their mother had no idea what that black box contained when she visited us. It was better that way than me being accused of conducting black art. When Birgit told me that if her mother would see me wandering the streets, she would most certainly talk to me, I knew that she was once again telling lies. Neither my ex-wife nor her children ever wanted to discover my real background, only making up their own stories about me and creating dreamt of or imagined references. They believed that since her discovery of me being not in their truth, all kinds of ugly things could be expected of me. Black magic was one of them, and therefore I was supposedly more likely to hurt others, for apparently Satan the devil loved inflicting people, and in particular the witnesses, with much pain and persecution. The whole situation can be summed up that all the Jehovah's Witnesses I came across based their beliefs on superstition. But what is superstition? Let me be a little more specific. It is a traditional belief that some kinds of action or events can lead to or even predict an unrelated event. Ponder upon what some superstitious people believe. For instance, if a black cat crosses their path, they will have bad luck. What about having your slippers accidentally turned upside down? When you walk under a ladder, you may have an awful time. These kinds of belief are superstitious because those events are traditionally thought to be connected in forecasting a future event. Superstitions have existed throughout human history. Strangely, some highly educated people have also been observed acting superstitiously at times. Some joke about eluding bad luck by knocking on wood. Many superstitions are relatively recent, and you may find them evident in certain sporting events. Interestingly, many traditions are based on superstition. You may find all kinds of them when people are eating, working, sleeping, playing, getting married, having a baby, even dying in different circumstances and time. Consider Friday 13th, for example. Some superstitions seem to be related to important events in a person's life, such as the birth of a child, entry into adulthood, marriage, and pregnancy. For example, people born on a Sunday are said to always have good luck. You must leave all the doors and windows open so that the spirit of the deceased person can leave freely. There are superstitions which involve magic. In one such, it is believed that similar actions will instigate similar actions. A newborn must first be carried upstairs before being carried downstairs, so that the child will confidently rise in the world and have a successful life. The Japanese believe people in hospitals should be given potted plants, and not cut ones, for live plants symbolize the patient's recovery. In some countries, pregnant women are encouraged to look at beautiful people discreetly, for this would lead them to have beautiful children. Other types of superstitions involve somebody taking action to cause something else to occur or avert something ungainly. These are known as causal superstitions, which allegedly ensure good luck. Some people avoid starting a trip on Fridays, especially on the 13th, for both are apparently related to bad luck. Throwing rice at newlyweds is to guarantee that they have many children. Causal superstitions may also involve deeds intended to lead people into having bad luck and so harm them. Somebody who is disliked or hated must never offer a gift, for it can cause harm to the receiver. In my case, due to my being disfellowshipped by the Jehovah's Witnesses, to give any gifts to my children or friends who are still practicing witness activities can supposedly influence them to leave the organization. Worse still, it may lead to their eternal damnation. This is a causal superstition and widely practiced in witchcraft. My former German friends, who used to burn the gifts my mother sent me, were just the same, as with my ex-wife attempting to burn my books and demanding that I should get rid of them if I loved her. It is possible that such superstitions practiced by the witnesses are considered as the righteousness of the Lord. Having found a horseshoe, I jokingly told that it led to good luck, and Magda was angry about what I said. However, it is a foretelling superstition. Think of seeing the ring around the moon. Apparently it means rain. What happens when you drop a mirror and break it to pieces? These can be considered as sign superstitions, and the ancients were heavily reliant on them, conducting their love affairs and wars accordingly. Some sign superstitions can also become causal ones. If you hang a horseshoe above your door, witches cannot enter. And if you carry a necklace of garlic, vampires will not touch you. Someone who spills salt can cancel the curse by throwing a pinch of it over their left shoulder. Strangely, Magda's parents believed in such superstitions, and one could talk with them at ease, much to her annoyance. Some people laugh at these superstitions, for they do not correlate with our modern sophistications. Yet there are scholars who believe that superstitions have a scientific basis. Once in England, tea made from foxglove was believed to cure certain heart diseases, and today doctors prescribe digitalis, which is a medicinal drug made from the dried leaves of the purple foxglove for some cardiac conditions. We cannot deny that certain superstitions have useful origins. We are told that during the war years, lighting 3 cigarettes with 1 match held an important significance while in enemy territory. Consider the belief in astrology. Many people base their decisions according to the positions of stars, planets, and constellations. Superstitions in man's existence have always been a part of life and are founded upon man's fears. However, I do not personally have any interest in superstition. Now Birgit wanted to meet me regularly, but my place was not suitable for entertaining visitors, and certainly did not want her to. In other words, I did not want to be judged again, so instead I suggested that I visit her from time to time. She said she was living with an older person, a Vietnam veteran and great country singer, who apparently loved her and was keenly interested in the truth, and who I met later, and claimed that she was so very happy with him. She also told me very apprehensively at first that her brother Claude was very depressed because he had not seen his dad for a very long time since he had apparently abandoned them, always holding his head between his 2 fists, and was resentful about his father following the ways of the evil world. Yet at the same time he would not give a shit about his dad. However, could it actually be Birgit who did not really give a shit about her dad? At her enthusiastic invitation, and my desire to show her what I really meant when trying to explain how Jehovah's Witnesses would treat me, which she never listened to, one Sunday morning I met her in St. Kilda, who went to their service in the Kingdom Hall. Exactly as I had predicted, none of them approached or greeted me as if I did not exist, only talking and asking her to relay their greetings when she next saw her mother. They conducted their service as usual, with hymns they called kingdom songs, prayers, and talks according to teachings from literature written by their leaders in Bethel, their headquarters in Brooklyn, New York. Nearly 2 hours later, when everybody was leaving the hall, not one person acknowledged me as a human being, or even a piece of furniture. Birgit tried to introduce me to some witnesses, and discovered their empty looks as if I was nothing more than an insignificant decoration, a fly on the wall, or a lonesome boulder by the roadside. But I was not stirred or worried by it, knowing that it was their special treatment of the unfaithful. I was glad about attending the Kingdom Hall with Birgit, in order for her to see the reality for herself, as I had previously tried to explain, but as one can see, she was either incapable of understanding or deliberately distant. As usual, not believing in what had been explained, she was still insistent that some of them did not know who I was. That statement of hers was nothing short of a lie. Then she exclaimed that I should realize by now that they were not greeting me because they did not want to be influenced by the devil. What she was saying was obviously not true, just trying to justify herself. Remember, if they did not know me, why did they react to my presence that way? On the other hand, I did not realize that I was that devil. I simply resorted to keeping cool, calm, and collected, saying very little, if anything, in this regard. Obviously, she was bent with her mother's teachings and was following very superstitious advice. My supposed daughter surprisingly did not know anything about me, my characteristics or interests, and only things drummed into her by others made sense to her twisted mind. If she was my actual daughter, and I was her actual father, she would know everything that was to be known about me, but she obviously did not. In short, she was determined to tell all sorts of untruths about me, without knowing anything about my position in life, my cultural and educational background, only believing in the lies of the so-called faithful ones, and what she had been creating in her own illusionary world as the truth. Interestingly, many years later, a number of other people, including her brother, eagerly told me how Birgit loved her dad. Can anybody love somebody dearly and yet accuse that person with all kinds of ugliness? This reminded me of Magda's words, which she eagerly spoke. When somebody tells me lies as truth, and I preach about them to others, you can't blame me for telling the untruth. Did she by any chance know her cultist associates were feeding her with multiple untruths? It was about then that Birgit told me her mother and brother lived in Perth, and he wanted to come to Melbourne. When I asked her if Claude would like to meet me when he did, she said she did not know. She was not sure whether her mother would allow him to see me. When I inquired her why, her only answer was, "You know why." Soon after, she added that if I did not speak about evil things, it would be all right, and she was certain that Mum would instruct him not to believe in his father's lies anyway, so it would be okay if he wanted to talk to me. It was evident that she was adamant in believing that I was nothing other than a liar. This again showed me how fearful her mother was in case I would tell the real truth. By this I knew that she was most definitely feeding her mother with many lies and did not want her mother to discover it. Sooner or later, she needed to correct the situation, no matter how embarrassing and hurtful it might be. But being the way she was conducted into believing things, it might be an impossible dream for her to wake up to reality. The honest truth is that although I loved them as my children, they nevertheless insisted on twisting the truth and declaring me a liar. She told me she needed to come to Melbourne to be closer to her dad. That could not have been anything other than a lie, because when she met me at Myer, Melbourne, by accident, she did not know that I was going to be there. Her coming to Melbourne was most certainly for a different reason. She showed me several photographs of her partner John, and spoke of what a caring person he was. It was also during this time that I was occasionally visiting Muriel's family, and other times Wendy, near to where I lived. One day, when visiting Wendy, I noticed copies of some of the photographs Birgit had shown me attached to a notice board on the wall. Surprised, I asked Wendy about them, and she told me about John being a very honest man, and Vietnam veteran who was involved with a woman whose name she could not remember, who was causing a lot of heartache to him, wanting to get his house. Wendy explained that the girl was not a morally right kind, and what she was doing to John, their family friend, was mischievous and illegal. She further explained that he was keenly interested in spirituality and American Indians' wisdom. I could not say a thing, for I was shocked and spellbound. I only told her that I had seen John somewhere else as well, but I still cannot forget Birgit's words regarding his interest in Jehovah's Witnesses. The whole situation looked very unusual and suspicious. Nevertheless, just like Annette used to declare when they were very young and in my care, Birgit always wanted to have whatever her elder sister had, and so one wonders if she had honed her skills in doing so. Possibly John might have been having affairs with both sisters at the same time. I could not be sure, for I had not seen Annette for a long time, and I do not think that I will ever see her again. She had no idea what I knew. According to Wendy, who did not know that I was the father of the girls John was involved with, she told me that he used to visit her just to talk about his sorrows and many other things about my alleged daughters. I felt John was more than just close friends with her. When I made mention of it to Birgit discreetly, she either did not listen to what I said or did not consider my words as important, probably believing that I could only tell lies anyway. Maybe she needed to look at herself and listen to her own words first. I was unsure whether she was married to John or they were simply living together. When visiting Birgit one evening, Claude was also there, but he was not sure if he should greet me, be excited, hold my hands, or say a word or two. He stood there like a young man frightened to touch something evil, or perhaps inflicted with leprosy, and would not even say hello to me. He preferred to keep himself busy with things in the kitchen, talking to John, and could not wait until I disappeared. It really hurt me, and I knew that my son, as well, had been turned against me, not wanting to see this man, who was apparently a devil-worshipper, while taking commands from John, behaving as if he was the father. Was there perhaps some other relationship between them I was not meant to know about? I knew I had no room in Birgit's life, and certainly no reason to be there. In a different time, Claude remained seated, not even getting up or wanting to greet me, let alone acknowledge my presence. I considered it to be an incident one needed to ignore, and preferred not to stay long. When I got up to leave, I put my hand on his short curly hair, feeling very emotional, and told Claude that I still loved him, then left their premises, with tears streaming from my eyes, and walked into Auckland Street for a strong cup of coffee. When I met Birgit later, she told me the reason behind Claude's behavior, saying that I had hurt him by leaving the family and not searching for him. I needed to remind her about their mother taking them away and changing her surname into something other than mine. It was not her maiden name, and what she did was for the purpose of keeping the children away from me, claiming I was disfellowshipped and therefore evil in every imaginable way. They left me. I still will not blame her mother, for I knew that Jehovah's Witnesses have been responsible for breaking my family, while manipulating her naive character and childish mindset. Who knows, maybe her new name was just the same as her secret lover. She was forced into believing that every evil deed could be expected of people who were disfellowshipped like me, being seen with a black girl in the tram by the faithful sisters, or drawing the image of a half-naked girl in front of my children one morning. She was certainly under Jehovah's Witness-induced mind control, and I was completely ignored. During one other unusual meeting with my son at Birgit's, Claude asked me, would I ever recognize the only true God and come back to the truth? He avoided any eye contact with me, as I firmly told him that I would never, ever accept falsehood, and therefore would never be a part of the witnesses. That was my final answer, and I was not going to talk about it any more. After what I had experienced and all the lies told about me, I had no desire to be forced into joining something that had stolen my youth and destroyed my family. I was not the only casualty, for there are countless other broken families like mine due to Jehovah's Witness interference. Since my ex-wife was so conditioned to believe that people who were of the world, and therefore had to be against their God, all kinds of immorality, including extramarital affairs, could be expected of them. And this was apparently why Magda showed a great deal of jealousy towards me in case I looked at other women, especially when I drew the portrait of a girl. It was seen as if I was having an affair with her. We cannot wipe off the existence of the opposite gender. Wherever we are, working, studying, or just encountering them in our daily lives. Working with women in the office does not mean we are having affairs with them. Was she by any chance having affairs with other men in the office when we met all those years ago in Germany? However, Magda could not be spoken contrary to what she believed, and we had no communication since my disfellowshipment. All I remember is that Claude had been extraordinarily childish in his behavior and forced into being very naive when I met him after all those years, but there was always hope that he would one day wake up to the real truth. No matter what his attitude was towards me, I was not going to be offended, only wishing he would soon begin to understand the real issues of life as they were. When home, I stood in front of the framed drawing of his portrait, which I created, and asked his image what had happened to him, but he could not hear. John treated Claude as if he was his servant, and not as my son, telling me he needed a lot of discipline. What kind of discipline was he talking about? I wondered. Claude spoke to me of the worst thing one could imagine, but when he said what he wanted, Birgit looked very pleased. I cannot forget his words. I feel uneasy and embarrassed to call you Dad. I thought that perhaps I should not worry about meeting him ever again. Let him have a little time to think about where he stood. I was not going to bother him any more, and was certainly not going to be bothered with this new development either. This was more than enough. It seemed that I was not welcome in his life, and was certainly no longer encouraged to entertain the idea of having anything to do with him. He did not give a shit for his dad, did he? He had obviously become his mother's pet only, and a Jehovah's Witness child slave. Could one trust Birgit about this issue? She later told me that he was in shock, and I should give him a little time. I responded, whether he really wants to get to know me or not, it will not make any difference, for I will always love him as my son, and when he is older he may become a little wiser and try to discover who I truly am, but I might be gone by then. In addition, Birgit responded, You know why he is like that. You should know it. Do you know what I mean? By the way, Mom always speaks the truth. You know. You can always come back to the truth, Dad. Had I ever been in it? Did she really know what truth was? From then on, she repeated her words over and over again, every time we met, often telling me, You can always come back to the truth. Remember, we are living in the last days. Her taking sides with Jehovah's Witnesses, and her lifestyle clearly obvious, it looked totally inappropriate for her to advise me, while indirectly telling me that I was the bad guy for not being in their truth and being disfellowshipped. What was she attempting to achieve? Was she preaching to me like the rest of the witnesses? Repent, the end is nigh. Many years ago, a German friend told me something in regard to liars, which I can never forget. Once lied, forever untrusted. How right he was. One thing was an absolute certainty. Jehovah's Witnesses lie all the time, and try to convince themselves that what is imagined is true. They joined the UN, and for a long time denied this. However, they could no longer hide it from their congregations, and their excuse is that they want to have access to the UN's libraries. But the UN informs inquirers that there is no need for them to become members to access their libraries. One asks why the witnesses have seen fit to hide it. It is also fascinating to note that they consider the UN as the infamous harlot which the Bible speaks of. According to reliable information, they have begun to sell many of their kingdom halls, as they are supposedly combining congregations because their membership is diminishing, yet they eagerly claim that their numbers are increasing. Many Jehovah's Witnesses now realize that they have been guided to live in falsehood. Their so-called prophecies regarding the end of the world and Armageddon have never happened, as so often preached. They believe and preach about many fabricated lies under the banner of truth, and if only one lie is exposed, how can one trust and believe anything they promote? People are beginning to wake up to the real truth. In the circumstances, I regretted meeting Birgit. She was not helping any of us by being so extreme and biased towards me. Then again, was it not what her mother desired so that they could all be saved at the end of the world, without any satanic influence through their father, the evil one? I suppose all the witnesses I have encountered felt fulfilled in their grand achievement. They certainly knew how to manipulate the naive and destroy families. I still cannot forget how eager Birgit was in inviting me to go with her to their kingdom hall to show me what a wonderful reception I would receive. Despite everything I told her in regard to being shunned due to being disfellowshipped, she obviously did not believe, or at best ignored me. Has she been able to comprehend that I was truthful about how they would react to me? Instead of seeing my viewpoint, she tried to teach me why they behaved the way they did when I went there with her. I was invisible and completely ignored, as I had experienced long before. Later she demanded that we went into the city to see the film Silence of the Lambs, expecting that I would enjoy the ugliness and gore which she loved to see for a second time. For somebody who apparently enjoyed peaceful things, as she tried to tell me, just the way her mother supposedly desired, it was unusual. I cannot forget when she admitted how she attempted to burn my belongings before voluntarily leaving to live with her mother. She was absolutely decisive not to believe in anything I said without any respect to me, completely undermining my dignity. It still hurts. She obviously considered me as naught else than a completely ignorant and itinerant liar. That was most certainly due to being hypnotized by being constantly subjected to the same dictum for an extensive time, and it had become one of her personal trends. It seemed that nothing in the world would change it. In fact, she presented a relentless mindset that she would do everything possible to declare herself always true, even when completely wrong. The whole situation was forcing me to disappear from their lives, never to be seen again. I do not think that her mother would be very happy after discovering that she had been fed with her daughter's lies if she has not already discovered it. I still wonder how she could douse my electronic equipment, expensive books, and furniture with petrol, as she freely admitted, regretting that the matches did not light. If everything would go up in flames, and she escaped the fire, how would she live with what she did. I still believe it was unadvised from the most brainless and utterly superstitious people practicing Jehovah's Witnesses. I find it hard to believe that her mother was the original culprit behind the whole attempt to destroy me altogether. Who indeed was following the greatest evildoer, and who was the devil worshipper? It still is very hard to understand how extremely superstitious the Strohbachs were, burning the expensive articles my mother sent me. They did so behind my back all those years ago, long after telling me how and why they did so, believing my mother was a witch. But she was not. Her only sin was not being interested in Jehovah's Witness truth. Nor can I forget how Magda was burning some of my books, later admitting to have done so, pressurizing me to get rid of my charmed things of evil, such as science fiction literature, if I wanted to keep my family together, and if I loved her. When I asked Birgit whether she had been knowledgeable of my living in Perth and having a studio shop in Victoria Park, and if she had noticed my advertisements in the papers, radio, and on television, she answered that she could not remember. I told her that I was also working there as a radio jockey on one of the Perth radio stations. She answered me with, "Yeah, I remember Mom used to cut many articles and advertisements from the newspapers." I did not know why she was doing so. Later she added, "Oh, I remembered now. Once Mom said, 'Oh mein Gott, your father has found us.'" However, I was unsure whether it was yet again one of her lies. It was also during this time when a friend of mine, who happened to be the president of the Theosophical Society, invited me to attend a special Buddhist ceremony in North Melbourne, where some of the monks took pictures of people being accepted into their midst. It was almost like a baptism, after reciting certain mantras, and guests were encouraged to recite the words individually, which phonetically sounded like "Hutai for me lei," although the actual words were not written in that manner. But that pronunciation was close enough. We were advised not to utter it outside the circle, and only use it privately or within designated Buddhist temples. They kept taking photographs. When they printed, some showed additional images of long and short color streaks and spheres. Whenever my images were captured, there were no such inclusions. Apparently those who were really spiritual and accepted by the adepts had those added imagery in their photographs. However, when my friend had invited me in the first place, he did so after seeing some of my photographs, which Edita had proudly been showing around. We had captured phantom images of my beloved cat Lucky after the animal had died. Maybe Lucky was trying to relay a message to people left behind, probably saying he loved them. Indeed, those kinds of images have been captured by others on virgin film in the past, like I have done, and tests revealed them to be authentic, although they appeared like double exposures. I have no proper answer how they were technically done, with only one click of the shutter. Some of my student friends attending that occasion have also been meeting at Melbourne University, where I have taken part in those gatherings. It was an interesting study. Alas, some of them, seeing me with Birgit in the city, did not want to greet me any longer, and later I discovered that devout Buddhists were expected to be celibate. Obviously, they did not realize that she was my daughter. When at the university, I felt the need to clarify the preconceived thoughts of some inquisitive minds. When I met Birgit on another occasion, she offered me a book she had been given, advising me that I might learn something from it. It was a little book with the title Through Peace and Security, published by the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, 1986. I asked her if she had learnt something from it, but she responded with silence. She probably hoped that by reading it I would become wise and accept the truth. I browsed through its pages, particularly page 173, and started reading it to her while she prepared some Lipton tea for us. A wife, too, can make a major contribution to the family. The cooperation with her husband and her wise use of time in molding their children's lives in a godly way is usually reflected in the conduct and attitude of the children. Proverbs 29:15. Even where there is no father in the home, careful teaching from the Bible, coupled with fine example, yields good results. She either listened half-heartedly or did not feel the need to listen to me, as she kept talking about completely irrelevant issues of no substance. Then I read further. But if the father who is in the home does not accept God's word, or even persecutes his wife, what should she do? If she loves Jehovah, she certainly will not turn her back on him. It is Satan who charged that humans would forsake God if subjected to hardship. She surely does not want to be doing Satan's bidding. Job 2, 1-5, Proverbs 27:11. Furthermore, by continuing to honor her marriage vows, even under difficulty, she shows her deep respect for the author of marriage, Jehovah God. We will receive love if we practice showing love to others. Luke 6:38. However, I thought maybe in this instance the reference to the author of marriage needs to be replaced with the destroyer of marriage, because many people have experienced exactly that after their disfellowshipment. Do Jehovah's Witnesses really show genuine love to others? One naturally wonders. By observing my daughter Birgit and son Claude having been totally alienated and turned completely against me, was it also part of the godly practice? It was so unusual to see a completely blank look on her face. She was surprised that I even cared to make an effort to read those sentences to her. But if she was as clever as she wanted to appear, she would understand why I read them. If I attempted to read something like that to Magda, she would shout at me, asking, "How dare you read the Word of God, you devil?" On another occasion, I suggested Birgit read Proverbs chapter 14, or just make mention of it to her beloved mother. This is the Bible text her mother once did not want to hear after listening to the lecture at a district assembly. She might have felt very dutiful. It reads, "Every wise woman buildeth her house, but the foolish plucketh it down with her hands. In the mouth of the foolish is a rod of pride, but the lips of the wise shall preserve them. A faithful witness will not lie, but a false witness will utter lies. The poor is hated even of his own neighbor, but the rich hath many friends. He that despiseth his neighbor sinneth, but he that hath mercy on the poor, happy is he. Wisdom resteth in the heart of him that hath understanding, but he that which is in the midst of fools is made known." One hopes that those who judge others while believing themselves to be the only righteous ones, allegedly following Bible principles, would take note of what is written before trying to preach it. By befriending people and then dumping them so that those judged by the witnesses feel the wrath of their God, having no friends to turn to, cannot be righteous. Neither turning one's family against oneself can be a God-pleasing attitude. A little understanding can go a long way. People are not brainless, unable to think, and incapable of finding solutions to all kinds of problems they may face. Faithfulness does not require adherence to any cult. Luckily, some of us belong to groups of humans who are free thinkers without attachment to any belief system of fanaticism the world is accustomed to. If you notice, witnesses love to appear well-educated and professional at all times, and tend to make specialized comments as if they know the answers, although they do not have a clue. They never hesitate to tell untruths without realizing that they are doing so because their ministers and elders told them. I believe Claude was experiencing severe confusion, not knowing where to turn. He might or might not have been encouraged to be in touch with his father, or help him realize his ways being wrong according to the cultist training forced upon him, as with his sister Birgit during his childhood, perhaps believing he could help save his father's life. This way the whole of his family would unite as one. He could not see any solution, feeling obligated to help open his dad's eyes to the truth which he was obliged to adhere to. In fact, some of his biased viewpoints in regard to my being wicked as part of an evil world were very obvious and extreme. I wondered if it was not a way of falsely judging me, the other human person, in accordance with Jehovah's Witness teachings, through his mother, who was always against his father. Following my move to Chelsea Heights, Claude visited me once or twice, probably a little disturbed about me living there with Edita and her son Robert, without realizing that I was not in any relationship with her. Once, when visiting me, he grabbed Robert by his ankles, holding him upside down for a joke, while the little one cackled. Edita looked perturbed, and I could not wait until Claude put him down gently. When he did, I heard Robert shout, "Phew, you smell like sweat." And Claude responded with, "Yeah, it is the real man's smell." I cannot forget those moments. In regard to his being a part of the religious movement, Edita was only too pleased to talk about her once-upon-a-time involvement with them, thus surprising him immensely. While I was living in Springvale, he would briefly visit me when in Victoria. By that time Birgit had moved to Perth, to be closer to her beloved mother, but I believe she had other reasons, and told me nothing about it. She told me, when I met her for one last time in the city, that John wanted to live in Perth. From then on she kept sending me her daughter's photographs, occasionally posting cassette tapes containing more recent music she had copied from her audio discs. She wrote to me about her newborn twins, sending their pictures, and always mentioned what a lovely man John was. Whenever I met Claude, he never spoke anything positive about John's attitude towards him, treating him like a toddler. I was to learn much later that John had supposedly either been punching or kicking Birgit's tummy while she was pregnant with her twins and treating her badly. Obviously, his Vietnam War days would have left him with a degree of psychological trauma. However, this story might have been invented to paint him as black as possible for reasons known only to Birgit. Then again, I hardly had any communication with him. Therefore, everything I knew about him was gleaned from what I had heard and observed when visiting Birgit in St. Kilda. Claude and John had kept away from me, spending most of their time in the kitchen. However, when I discreetly psychoanalyzed him, on occasions I discovered similar trends as many witnesses display, which is mild sluggishness in remembering things. The observed fact is a total reversal from the traditional mindset and mental dullness when they are freed from the Jehovah's Witness bondage. One day Claude came to visit me, visibly shaken and frightened. After a short black Turkish coffee, which calmed him down, he told me how a UFO was chasing him, and felt that I might have some explanation about what the reason could be behind it. I made mention of a number of known facts, advising him that there was no need to be alarmed, but he responded with a sigh and said, "I thought you had something to do with it, Dad, because you do strange things, like magic." I felt obliged to explain that I was interested in science, technology, and helping people understand themselves, and not in make-believe stories. But I knew that he was not able to accept what I said as a truth statement, for he was most certainly trained to believe that only Jehovah's Witnesses and his mother spoke the truth. Being completely inattentive to what was being explained, he would no doubt forget the whole thing anyway. Another time he told me all about his car and how expensive the blue metallic paint job was. He said he was staying somewhere in Victoria with a farming family who were also witnesses and in the truth, but for some reason he did not disclose their whereabouts. He told me how hateful they were to him. Some people accused him of having grey eyes, which were probably like his father's evil eyes. However, how did they know his grey eyes were evil, and how did they know whether I had grey eyes or not? Who could have told them something like that? Besides, they have never met me, and what did they know about me, unless they were psychic? My eyes are dark brown, and his mother's eyes have similar tones to his. I was so surprised yet again how superstitious some people could be. According to some others, they had threatened him at gunpoint, telling him to go away after literally disassembling his car on their farm with the excuse that he owed them money, which apparently he did not. Were they really in the truth, as Claude said? Or were they only studying the Bible? One could not tell. I could only consider how unethical those people were. One would hope that he had enough sense to comprehend the situation. Would he consider remaining within that organization after what he had experienced? However, some of the experiences contained in the previous paragraph have later been denied, although I have always carefully recorded everything experienced, documenting significant events and developments in my life, almost immediately in my well-kept diaries. If for some reason the information presented herein on an as-is basis is wrong, it was not deliberately altered to paint a scene of ugliness, for I have never believed in falsehood due to my personal convictions. I do not believe in lies, contrary to what some members of my family have loosely classified me in their biased judgment on their instructions according to the Jehovah's Witness faith. They are so convinced of being the only righteous people speaking the truth. If there was such a righteous God, and Jehovah's Witnesses were only those I have been knowledgeable of, there can be no reason for me to believe in that jealousy-stricken, restrictive, wrathful, and fanatical deity created by people forcing their way to prove their supremacy, allegedly following the Bible, created by man of wisdom and great intelligence. Surely it is far better to believe in nothing like this, and be free from dogma of any kind. In absolute truth, it is far better to be called an atheist than being classified as belonging to a man-made belief system of untruths. The experience reminded me of the time when Annette insisted on staying with her friend, the daughter of a family belonging to another cult, as mentioned elsewhere, and who were formerly involved with Jehovah's Witnesses, and who had abducted her. When visiting them at their farm in relation to Annette's disappearance, the police and I were threatened at gunpoint. It still amazes me to discover what kind of negative behavior can be expected from people involved with Jehovah's Witnesses who preach about non-violence, supposedly following Jesus' teachings. To tell you the honest truth, witnesses are preachers of falsehood. I am not saying this lightly, and certainly not in a discriminative way. Consider some of their teachings and avoidance when needing to clarify matters which they are not comfortable with. I had a number of their publications forced on me by Magda, or subsequently given to me by her brothers, explaining some of their claims which are enough to turn anybody with some intelligence away. After associating with them for a considerable time and being married to one, it gave me an opportunity to get to know them well. One thing I learned was that the Jehovah's Witness organization deliberately keeps everybody in complete darkness. You are not meant to question their teachings. Many still prefer to pretend to know the truth, just like the controllers at their headquarters. In the dictionary, pretense is described as an attempt to make something that is not the case appear true. This is exactly what the witnesses do. I am hoping that what I am about to explain will not be taken as preaching. There are scriptures in the Bible which the Jehovah's Witness organization and their governing body do not want adherers to know anything about. There is a publication under the title of Reasoning from the Scriptures, and there is an intriguing passage on page 216, number 8, where it says, "Last days. We are living now since 1914. In the last days of this wicked system of things, that some who saw the event of 1914 will also see the complete destruction of the present wicked world. That lovers of righteousness will survive into a cleansed earth." This is interesting, for we are left dangling somewhere regarding the witnesses being described as the lovers of righteousness. But their deeds speak loud and clear that they are not what they present themselves to be. Interestingly, many who saw those events of 1914 have since died through natural attrition. Maybe we should look at their Watchtower magazine of May 1984 and discover a number of issues regarding their teachings. However, Armageddon and the paradise which was to follow did not happen within this generation. I am sure that the witnesses are clever enough to notice this and know that there are some who are disfellowshipped like me and are cognizant about it. I queried a number of issues with their elders, but instead of clarifying matters, they preferred to chastise me, warning me regarding the dangers of questioning the Spirit. My understanding of their response was, therefore, to avoid answering something they had no idea about. This eventually led their judicial committee to disfellowship me. I intend to examine some Bible texts to explain my questions. When one reads Deuteronomy 18, verses 20 and 22, particularly New World Edition, which is their interpretation, we discover, "If any prophet presumptuously speaks a word in my name that I did not command him to speak, or speaks in the name of other gods, that prophet must die. However, you may say in your heart, how will we know that Jehovah has not spoken the word? When the prophet speaks in the name of Jehovah, and the word is not fulfilled, or does not come true, then Jehovah did not speak that word. The prophet spoke it presumptuously. You should not fear him. How can we know if the Watchtower Society speaks the truth? So far they have spoken of things which never came to pass. In Deuteronomy 18:18-20, we discover this. True prophets speak in the name of God, but merely claiming to represent him is not enough. Verse 22 is avoided for some reason, and this may be because presumptuously speaking is the biblical definition of false prophet. Watchtower article once contained an interesting heading. They shall know a prophet was among them. Does Jehovah have a prophet to help them, to warn them of danger and declare things to come? Who is this prophet? Again, Watchtower magazine, April 1st, 1972, published these words. This prophet was not one man, but was a body of men and women. It was the small group of footstep followers of Jesus Christ, known at that time as the International Bible Students. Today they are known as Jehovah's Christian Witnesses. As any thinking intellectual can understand, they obviously twist the truth in pretense, or prophesy, speaking presumptuously.